Today we'll be making a yeast starter. What I have here is a California ale by White Labs. Pretty much what we want to be doing is putting that into a yeast starter and growing the cell count about 3 times is what I'm estimating, and that'll give me the proper cell count that I need for a pale ale that I plan to brew tomorrow. So if you're wondering what the benefits are to a yeast starter, really the biggest thing is that it's going to give you a cleaner flavor profile. When we throw just one vial of yeast in, we're working with a small number of cells, and if you have a high gravity beer, it's going to be calling for a high number of cells. Now, it's not to say that it won't do the job, but what you're doing is you're throwing a small amount of yeast cells into this wort that's going to have to multiply and grow a drastic number of times, and once it finally does, those cells are going to be weak and tired, and it's going to create a lot of off flavors. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to find that proper pitch rate. We want a higher number of cells, not so high that they go in and do everything without growing and multiplying, but just enough so that they maybe multiply 2 to 4 times. Once they do that, they're going to go through the entire alcohol process as a healthy cell, producing the cleanest flavor profile. So liquid yeast is a lot better than dry yeast, but with the liquid yeast comes a big drawback, and that's the shelf life. While dry yeast is inexpensive and lasts a lot longer in the refrigerator or even just on the countertop, liquid yeast does not. With liquid yeast, we have about a 23% drop in viability every month. Without doing a yeast starter, you can still hit a pitch rate by just adding extra packages of yeast. However, yeast can be very expensive, so I do recommend going out and getting a yeast starter kit. They're a little expensive, but they will pay for themselves. It's probably like the one thing in homebrew that will pay for itself really quickly is because you don't have to buy the extra yeast every single time. When you go to the homebrew store, look for the freshest yeast pack you can, but sometimes that's not always available. When you go and you're looking for that specific yeast, you might only find one vial of it at your local homebrew supply, and it might be a month old. This might deter you from getting that yeast that you originally wanted and substituting it with something that they have that's fresher. With the yeast starter, you don't have to worry about that anymore. See, what you can do is still get the yeast that you wanted, bring it home, and grow it into a fresh, viable yeast at the right pitch rate. So when doing a yeast starter, there is some equipment that you'll need, and the most important one is going to be a Pyrex flask. You want to make sure that you go with Pyrex here because we're going to be boiling this and then cooling it off in an ice bath. And if you use any other type of glass, it will shatter and break. So the next thing you want to get is DME. That stands for dry malt extract, and they sell it at all the local homebrew supply stores. And it's just that, it's dry malt extract. When we mix it with enough water, we're going to get a very low gravity wort, and that is what our yeast is going to feed on and grow in over the next 14 to 24 hours. The next thing you want to get is a stir plate. While this isn't exactly necessary, you can do it manually, you can do it by hand, you can still grow it without this. It helps a lot. This one I got from a science lab supply store. You can find some that are custom made for yeast starters. You can even find some tutorials on how to make one yourself. So research that, look at what you want to do, get the best thing for you. But definitely recommend doing a stir plate at some point in time. First thing we'll want to get out is a scale to measure everything. If you don't have a scale, I recommend picking one up as it can be a great tool for measuring hops, priming sugar, and all sorts of ingredients. Go ahead and measure your desired amount of DME, and once you have it dialed in, just add it all to the dry Pyrex flask. DME can get a bit messy, it clumps easily and loves to stick to all sorts of surfaces. Just go slow and grab a funnel if you need. Once that is ready to go, it's time to reset the scale and pour in the desired milliliters of water. 1 milliliter is equal to 1 gram, so that's super convenient if your scale can only measure grams and ounces like mine does. I like to use already hot water for this part. I find that the DME will mix a lot easier and won't get caked to the bottom where we'll be applying direct heat. It also means we'll get the starter to a boil that much faster. Once you've added the water, give it a vigorous shake to get it all dissolved into a nice blonde colored wort. It may be a little cloudy, but should get clearer as it boils. From here, you can put the Pyrex flask right on the open flame of your stovetop. However, if you have an induction or coil burner on your stove, do not place the flask directly on it. For that, you will want to do a double boil method, which is simply putting the flask in a shallow pot of water and bringing the water to a boil. Takes a little more time to get boiling and you won't be able to control the temp as easily, but the pot will catch any boil over, so it may save you a lot of cleanup. If using the open flame, keep it on a medium heat and be patient with it. Once it starts to boil, the starter liquid will foam and boil over quickly. Don't get distracted with anything else, just sit there and watch the starter come to a boil. Once you see bubbles, bring the heat down even lower and keep a close watch for about 10 minutes. Now all that is left to do is prepare a small ice bath, kill the heat from the starter, and give it a minute to calm down from the boil. Get yourself a good oven mitt and plunge the Pyrex flask directly into the ice bath, gently swishing it around till the temperature of the starter liquid drops to somewhere between 70 and 80 degrees. So there you have it, our 750 milliliter yeast starter is ready to go. Just pitch the yeast directly into here, sanitize scissors, all that stuff, same way you would if you were pitching directly into a wort. Do that in here. As I said, we will be putting this on the stir plate, so we do have that little stir pill here. And what you want to do is you don't want to drop it directly in, okay? Make sure you're not just dropping it, because this is heavy still and could crack the glass at the bottom, especially if you have it on the stir plate and it's magnetized. You'll be dropping it straight in with some magnetic force pulling it even farther. So just tip it 45 degrees and slide it down in. Make sure it's sanitized. After that, the only thing left to do is cover the top with tin foil, or if they have those little stoppers that came with the flask, you can use that as well. But we're just going to put this on the stir plate and let it go for the next 14 to 24 hours. If you're not going to be using a stir plate, just make sure you're giving it a shake as often as you can by hand. Another thing also to note is that you want to keep this out of direct sunlight. If you get a little bit of sunlight bouncing off of your kitchen and it's hitting it, it's most likely going to be okay, but what you really want to avoid is direct sunlight. So that's pretty much it for me. I hope you found this useful. I hope that you get to try it yourself and see how it impacts your beer. If you've found other ways to do it, please leave it in the comments. Love to talk more on, more inventive ways of doing your own yeast starter as well, or things that you may have done differently. Later on, I will be doing a video where I recollect the yeast from a done wort, and we'll be using a yeast starter to basically bring that back to life and make sure that it is viable for another batch of beer. So subscribe if you're interested in seeing that. See you next time.